What's up guys, welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh video. In this video, since we just hit 250 subscribers, which by the way is awesome, so thank you guys for that, we're going to be going over my top 25 BGS graded Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Now I do have some other cards which would probably make the list if they were graded, but I either haven't sent them yet or they're still at Beckett, so this video is just going to be featuring all the cards which I already have graded. And for each card, I'll go over the story of the card a little bit, kind of give an idea of the rarity and the value. So without further ado, let's get right into it with number 25. Alright, so starting off with an ultimate rare, we have my BGS 9 Yugioh Lord of Searing Flames. Now this is one of the hardest ultis to grade in the game. It usually has centering issues and even condition issues right out of the pack. So BGS 9 is a pretty strong grade, and this particular copy is also pretty strong as well. So I may try and resub this at some point for a 9.5, but even as a 9, I would say it's valued somewhere between $2,000 and $2,500. Alright, next up we have the first of many LOB cards on this list, which is my Wavy Curse of Dragon 9.5 Gem Mint. And this has Quad Plus upgrades, which is one of the strongest 9.5s you can get, and it's also slightly faded, hence the printing error designation. Now in terms of value, obviously Curse of Dragon is an iconic monster from the anime, and it's definitely gone up a lot in the last year or so. So with the subgrades this has, I would say the value is somewhere between $2,500 and $2,750, depending on the buyer, which puts this at number 24 on the list. Coming in at number 23, we have another LOB Super. This time it's my Wavy Flame Swordsman. This is probably the most popular super rare in LOB, and it's understandable because it has really gorgeous aesthetics with the waves complementing the kind of flame theme of the card. This one has two 10 upgrades but a 9 on surface, which puts it a little bit lower on my list than it would be otherwise. And to be honest, the surface on this card is pretty spectacular, so I may actually resub it at some point and see if I can bump it to a 9.5 on surface. But even with these upgrades, I'd say it's valued, again, at least $2,500, and maybe even a little higher depending on the buyer. And the final LOB Super that I have on this list is my Wavy Regeki, which again is slightly faded and has that printing error designation. Now in general, Regeki is not quite as expensive as Flame Swordsman, but the reason this one actually comes above the Flame Swordsman in this video is because it has Quad Plus upgrades, which means that the card is only 0.5 away from being an overall pristine 10. And this particular card is incredibly clean. So I have considered even trying to send it back. The centering wouldn't get higher than a 9.5, but I do think the surface actually has a chance for a 10, which would raise the value of the card a lot. But even as it is, I would say this card, with the subgrades it has, is worth around $2,750. And again, maybe even a little higher depending on the buyer, but I wouldn't sell it for less than that. And at number 21, we have the only pristine on this list, which is my BGS 10 TP1 Hercules. Now, I love all of TP1. In my opinion, it's a pretty undervalued set. Even the commons and rares are awesome, but the holos especially all have great artwork and just have a really nice feel to them. So this particular card is the only BGS 10 that I've ever graded out of about 300 cards that I've sent. So it gives you an idea of how hard they are to grade. So whereas the PSA 10 of this card isn't worth that much, as a BGS 10, especially since it's population 1, I would again put the value somewhere around $2,750, although it is hard to put values on BGS 10s. And kicking off the top 20 now, we have my Jinzo from Pharaoh's Servant, which is again graded as a BGS 9.5. This card is, I would say, arguably the best looking secret rare. The foil on it just pops incredibly well. And it's also a classic card, which was incredibly powerful back at release, as well as being used by Joey in the anime. So it has a lot going for it, and so understandably the price has gone up a lot in recent times. I remember about a year ago you could still get a PSA 10 for around $1,000, maybe a little over that, but since then the value has gone up a huge amount. I'm not even sure what the value on a PSA 10 is now, but there have been some recent sales for BGS 9.5s with the same subs as this one for around $3,000. So that's where I put the value on this particular copy. And at number 19, we have the only MRD card on this list, which is my B-Skull Dragon Quad 9.5. Now I remember when you could pick this card up for about $300 to $350 in PSA 10. It's always been one of the hardest cards to find from Metal Raiders in general, so I thought it was undervalued for a long time, but that has finally been corrected now, and the PSA 10s of this card have absolutely shot up in price. The artwork isn't actually my favorite from Metal Raiders, but it's still a very nostalgic card for me since I did pull one of these as a kid. So it's a card I'm very happy to have in my collection. And in terms of the value, I'd say again, around 3k for this card with the subgrades it's got. And at number 18, we have my Retro Pack 1 Copycat, which is a BGS 9. Now, Retro Pack 1 is probably the hardest set to grade in general. It's pretty much impossible to get a gem, and even a 9 is extremely difficult to grade. This is a population 1 at Beckett, and I think there's one PSA 9 as well, but aside from that, all of the cards that have been subbed have gotten 8 or lower. I saw a PSA 8 recently sold for 1.6k, so I'd probably put this 9 around 3k, but it could actually be higher depending on the buyer and things like that. And at number 17, we finally have another Ultimate Rare. This one is one of my favorites. It's my European Elemental Hero Flame Wingman. Now you can see the North American print of this card has pretty much just a flat foil, but the European one has an insane amount of pattern to it. And it's one of my favorite TCG Ultimate Rares. So I'm very happy to have graded this card as a gem because it's really tough to find European versions of this card, even raw, in anything better than played condition. It's quite hard to value it because the population is so low. I've seen European PSA 10s sell for over 3k before, and that was last year when prices were quite a lot lower. So for this BGS 9.5, I would say the minimum value is 3k, but it could be higher again depending on the buyer. Next up at number 16 is my BGS 9.5 Ghost Rare Honest from Light of Destruction. Now this is a really tough ghost to grade, and in my opinion it's actually pretty undervalued, even though it's gone up a lot in price, because Light of Destruction boxes pretty much don't exist, and you're very unlikely to find a raw copy good enough to grade a gem either. So the value on this is a little bit hard to say, but I would say again at least 3k on this card, and to be honest probably closer to 3.5 given how low the population is. Okay, getting into the top 15, we have the King of Ultimate Rares, Horus the Black Flame Dragon, level 8. Now this is only a 9. I don't think there is a 9.5 in existence, and there's only a handful of PSA 10s because this is one of the hardest ultimates to grade in the entire game, if not the hardest. This copy has 3 9.5s on condition, and then just the 8.5 on centering, which does make it the strongest BGS 9 in existence. And to be honest, the centering on this card is not bad at all, so I may try and review this at some point to get that gem. But even as a 9, I would say this card is valued at around 3.5k, and actually with the subgrades, maybe even higher. The second Ghost Rare on this list, coming in at number 14, is my Ancient Fairy Dragon from Ancient Prophecy. I love the way this card looks. It's one of my favorite Ghost Rares, and it's also one of the 4 short printed 5D sets in first edition, which makes grading a gem extremely difficult. What I especially like about this copy is that it's one of the only BGS 9.5s to have a 9.5 on corners, because nearly always the top left back corner has a pretty significant amount of whitening on it right out of the pack. I think it's something to do with the cutting process in the factory. That corner just wasn't cut cleanly. But this one doesn't have that issue, which is awesome. And the centering got a 9 on it, but to be honest, is probably closer to a 9.5 for most graders, so it's a very strong card for a basic 9.5. I'd say the value is again around 3.5k on this. And at number 13, we have my favorite card in glossy print, which is Monster Reborn. This is a BGS 9.5 with 10s on edges and corners, so it's a pretty strong grade, even with a 9 on centering. It's hard to give values for LOB at the moment, because the market is just all over the place. You've got cards shooting up left and right, but I would say a minimum value of 3.5k on this, and it may actually be a bit higher, but it's hard to judge at the moment. So yeah, I love the way this card shines. It's definitely one of my favorite cards I have in my collection, and I'm very glad to own it with this grade. At number 12, we have the final Ultimate Rare on this list, which is my Elemental Hero Shining Flare Wingman, BGS 9.5. This is also a Euro print, like the Flame Wingman I showed earlier, and so you can see it's got a nice amount of pop to the foil, whereas the North American one is pretty flat. I do actually prefer the regular Flame Wingman to this card in terms of aesthetics, But there's no doubt in terms of value, this is considered the cover card of GX, and so the value is higher. I don't know exactly what the value is on this card at the moment because there aren't a lot of sales, and similar to OG, the GX market has kind of exploded in recent months, but I would probably put the value of this card somewhere around $4,000 with the subgrades it has. And coming in at number 11, we have one of the most divisive cards in the game, which is the corrected artwork Dark Paladin. Now, a lot of people love this card, a lot of people think it's overrated and shouldn't be worth anything. To me, I would say it's one of the more iconic cards from the OG era. And even though the population in PSA 10 is fairly high, the overall number of cards out there is definitely a lot lower than the regular artwork Dark Paladin that came from the pack. So I do think the premium is justified if you're talking about the rarity of the card. This is a quad plus 9, it's only 0.5 away from gem, and I probably will resub it at some point because both the centering and the surface could have a shot at a 9.5 depending on the grader. But even with the grade it has, I would say the value is something like 4K. It may even be a bit higher to be honest because I've seen some very big sales for this card recently. Alright, and we're finally getting into the top 10 here with Exodia the Forbidden One from LOB. This is a glossy print Exodia and it's a quad 9.5, which is a really solid grade on it. I love the way this card looks actually in both prints. The wavy version has kind of more of a vintage feel to it, but the way the glossy one pops is also exceptional. This has gone up a lot in value recently, so it's hard to say what exactly the value on this card is, but I would say for a quad 9.5 you're looking at a minimum of 5k, and it may be as high as 6-7k, but it's hard to say. And at number 9 we have my BGS 9 Morphing Jar from Tournament Pack 2. Now a regular 9 of this card would only be worth around 5k, but if you look closely you'll see that this is actually the Jinzo Jar error, which approximately doubles the value if you're going by recent sales. I think a stronger 9 actually recently sold for over $10,000, but I would say this card with the subs it has is probably worth around 8 to 9k depending on the buyer. Coming in at number 8 we have what is a lot of people's favorite card from LOB, and that is Wavy Red Eyes Black Dragon. This one is a basic 9.5 with a 9 on centering. PSA 10 actually goes for close to $20,000 these days, but even as a basic 9.5 I'd say the value is in the region of $10,000. And it's not hard to see why people like this card so much because the aesthetics of it are just perfect with those waves in the background. I'm not sure if it's my favorite card from LOB, but it's definitely right near the top of that list. Alright, and at number 7 we have another fan favorite. This time it's Dark Magician Girl from Magician's Force. So this isn't, to be honest, my favorite secret rare, but there's no denying that it's a pretty awesome looking card, and it's also iconic, and it also has that kind of hentai factor to it. So it's pretty easy to see why this card is one of the most expensive cards from the OG sets. This is a quad plus 9.5, and it's an extremely clean card, and honestly maybe the cleanest card that I've ever owned. So I do think I will send this back for review at some point and try and bump it to a pristine 10. Now if it got a 10, the value would be, I would say, at least $20,000 and probably higher. But even as a quad plus 9.5, I'd have no difficulty saying this card is worth $10,000. Now number 6 on this list is not actually just a single card, it's actually the complete 5-card set of Exodia the Forbidden One. And all 5 of the cards in this particular set are wavy print, which makes it even harder to assemble. I think there's maybe 4 or 5 wavy print PSA 10 Exodia sets out there, but for BGS, as far as I know, this is the only complete wavy 9.5 set. In terms of value, it's honestly kind of hard to say. These are all extremely hard to find, especially the left-hand pieces and the head. So I would say having the set together all in one place, you're looking at a value of at least $15,000, and it could be even higher. Alright, and now that we're finally at the top 5, it's also finally time for a Blue Eyes White Dragon. I wasn't actually 100% sure about the order of the top 5 on this list, because with really high-end cards it's hard to say exactly what the value is. But what I've gone with at number 5 is my glossy print Blue Eyes White Dragon from LOB. So this is a basic plus 9.5 with that 9 on centering but the 10 on corners. I really love the way this card looks in glossy print. This card was actually graded during the short period of time where Beckett was labeling the difference, So you can see this one came back with the label actually saying that it was glossy, which is a nice little bonus to have. In terms of value, a PSA 10 of this card actually recently sold for $85,000, and there have actually been 2 sales at that price. But I would say that to most collectors, glossy blue eyes is not worth that much, and definitely as a basic 9.5, the value is a lot lower. So I would say the minimum value on this card is $25,000, and it's probably worth somewhere between 30 to 33k. And coming in at number 4 on this list is actually another Blue Eyes White Dragon. This time it's my European Blue Eyes from LOB. In terms of raw card value, this is actually quite a long way below a North American Blue Eyes, but when you factor in difficulty to grade, it's a different story. So whereas the North American print of this card has well over 100 gems if you combine PSA and BGS, the European Blue Eyes I think has a total of 4, and out of those this is the highest graded copy. This is actually a card I pulled myself a long time ago from a box, so it has a lot of sentimental value to me as well. In terms of the monetary value of it, it's very difficult to say, and so I won't put a number on it, but I do think it's in the same kind of range as the other cards in the top 5 on this list. And coming in at number 3, we have the only prize card to feature on this list, which is my SJC Dezvolskelf. Similar to the European Blue Eyes, this is graded as a Quad++ 9.5, and that does also make it the highest graded Dezvolskelf in existence. Now, SJC is a little bit controversial, just because no one knows exactly how many copies of each card exist. There are official numbers, but especially for cards like Cyberstein, it's pretty easy to see that the number of cards in circulation is significantly higher than what is stated by Konami, and it's very difficult to say how much higher that number is. But I would say Dezvolskelf is definitely one of the scarcer SJC promos out there. There's one PSA 10 and a couple of BGS 9.5s, which gives it one of the lower populations. I actually really like the artwork on this card. It's kind of not such an iconic card if you're talking about the anime or anything like that, but in terms of artwork, it's definitely a great looking card, and it's a card I'm very happy to own in my collection. I've had offers on this card of $25,000. I do actually think it has potential to be worth more than that, so for the purposes of this video, I'll say around $30,000 on this card. And coming in at number 2 on this list, we have probably the most notorious card in my collection, and definitely my personal favorite card that I've had the chance to own, and that is my Wavy Gaia the Dragon Champion. So this card normally only exists in glossy print, but for whatever reason, a literal handful of these were released in wavy print as well, and that makes it, I would say, probably the rarest set card in existence. So I've seen personally 2 copies of this card total so far. This is the only graded copy I know of, and so it's also the highest graded copy. It's a BGS 9 with 10s on edges and corners, but I do actually think this card has a great chance to bump to a 9.5 on surface, which would make it a total gem mint grade. It's very difficult to put a value on something like this, because it's pretty much just whatever someone's willing to pay. But in terms of where it stands on this list, I would say it's the number 2 slab in my collection. And finally, coming to the number 1 card on this list, that would be my wavy, faded BGS 9.5 first edition LOB Blue Eyes White Dragon. So this is number 1 on the list, both in terms of the actual value of it, but also I guess the holy grail factor. Because for most collectors, wavy Blue Eyes is considered the pinnacle of OG collecting. I never expected to own a BGS 9.5 with this card in wavy print, let alone a faded one, so I definitely feel extremely honored to own this card. It looks incredible with that fade. And in terms of the value, it is difficult to say, but I would say the minimum estimate on this card would be $35,000, and the actual value is probably somewhere between 40 and 50k. And with that being said, we have finally reached the end of this 250 subscribers special. So thank you everybody for watching and also for subscribing to the channel. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please do leave a like. And also, if you have any suggestions for future content that you'd like to see, or really just any questions you'd like to ask me in general, feel free to put them in the comments down below, and I'll always do my best to get back to each and every one of you. So yeah, until next time, this is Schlost signing out.